Good afternoon. As Alex said, I'm Tarryn Gorre, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of a food technology company called Kafoodle. So we were actually government funded for the last 2 years to look at how you can use food technology in the health and social care space. So it's probably quite a bizarre topic to be talking about today. We've had a lot of NHS and clinical studies spoken about. But what I wanted to kind of go through is what is food technology. So it's a very, very broad term that is used. I mean, we're all consumers. So when we look at the new food technology platforms that are launching around delivery, we think of Deliveroo. Whereas in social care, we think of Meals on Wheels. And I'll come to later how I think that landscape is going to change. A lot of other stuff that is happening within food technology is, out of the US especially, is we've started to look at agricultural tech and food processing. So we've now started to grow crops in America where actually the wheat crops contain excessive amounts of plant protein, so that from one dish or one certain ingredient, you get your proteins, your fats, and your saturates that you don't have to start using animal protein. So when you look at the food technology landscape, we all refer to 2050. For those of you who know 2050, it's estimated that most of the Western world will not be able to eat animal protein because there just physically won't be enough animal protein on the planet to feed the whole population. So it is a how are we going to be feeding ourselves protein in other ways. And that kind of brings the next generation of food and drinks. What I won't go into today is what I think this will actually have an effect on the food chain, as well as the animals and the environment, which I think will be a whole other element that food technology will emerge. And then smart appliances and kitchen management. So what I'll do is talk about where I think a lot of this is going. So for those of you today, we're kind of looking at how to feed people at home for longer. And with that in mind, we've got smart appliances emerging. I don't know if anyone's seen them, where you can put in sensors into your fridge that'll tell you exactly what's left in your fridge, generate for you what recipes you should have, you can monitor your store cupboard, and you can actually get your oven turned on in time for when you get home. So the smart ovens. Now when we look at that capability within health and social care, what a lot of people are looking at is the tracking. So with the big electricity companies, it's being able to know if someone's turned on their oven in the last 48 hours, or boiled the kettle, or turned on a microwave, and having that all reported into relatives' apps or dashboards, so that relatives can see exactly what that relative's doing. There's also stuff like heat sensors, so you can see how hot the food is that's on their lap when they're eating it. It's all quite advanced. The area that I'm most passionate about is the food delivery platforms. So when I look at the future of Deliveroo and Uber Eats, my biggest thing that we're working on is the domiciliary care aspect. So as the population begins to age, as care homes are closing down, hospitals are full, we're going to have to feed pretty much a third of the population over the age of 65 at home, and there won't be other options. And the Meals on Wheels current scenario just won't cope with that. So what I think will definitely start to emerge is the likes of companies like Deliveroo and Just Eat entering into the domiciliary care market, where we'll start to look at how we can feed people at home healthy for £10 a day. I'm also hoping that what we'll start to see is the ready meal on the retailers, because the one thing that will come out is dementia. So as we start to grow and our population increases with dementia, and then being at home with dementia, the right to use a knife and an oven becomes a problem. So you end up with a vast majority of the population eating out of microwaves. So I've kind of spoken briefly about the different elements and what they're working on in agri-tech. I mean, I do think that the future is a very connected health and social care market. I think, personally, I think nutrition has been underlooked in a lot of aspects and not included. 90% of care planning software that is used in hospitals, care homes, and in domiciliary care still doesn't include a food and nutrition module. It still has nothing. So I believe that the future will have a completely integrated platform where everyone, whether you're a daughter or a mother looking after someone or a carer, you'll have access to recipes, nutrition, nutritional training, what you should buy, and how to feed someone at home in a better way. And that kind of brings me to where I think the NHS is pushing. So when we look at what the NHS is very much described as the average 8-year-old will cost us £1 million in care, purely based on a poor diet over the next 10 years. So what we need to start looking at is how do we actually combat health earlier in the population so that it doesn't have such an epic expense on the health and social care market. So we look at that as being, what our findings kind of came out with was a food diary. So the first time you go to a GP, an electronic record is kept of what happened. What your allergies are, what your preferences are, that all already happens. But what isn't kind of monitored from a very, very early age is how people are eating and what food is best for them to eat. Now, I won't get into the huge debate around personalized nutrition because I personally don't believe in it. And I do believe that as a population, we need to encourage people to eat better together. But what a lot of the new technologies are doing, and a lot of the care homes, for instance, and mainly so you see it come out of business and industry. If you look at contract caterers, they're very much looking at how they can keep employees healthier in the workforce for longer. So that is having a healthy eating offering, whether it's a porridge that is 200 calories on a Monday and a soup for lunch. That healthy is defined very differently, but the idea is that if you have a healthy choice and you take it, you'll stay healthier for longer and stay in the workforce for longer. And we're seeing that kind of come out of business and industry, and then it's looping back into kind of preventative illness. So a lot of the pharmaceutical companies are now jumping on the bandwagon of creating prescription diets and prescribed food, which in the long run I think will filter down into GP practices. So when we start to look at what the future of food looks like, I don't know how many of you have done it recently, but you might go to a GP and he might tell you that, I'll use myself as an example, that you're 33 years old, you're pre-diabetic and maybe slightly overweight, so you need to eat healthier. And he might suggest not putting sugar in your tea and having half an avocado a day. That is the prescription from the doctor. Now, for all reasons, we are one of the only countries where when you become a GP, you don't have to do any nutritional practice or any food practice. It's not considered health. That's changed now in the US, for instance, where you have to do an entire module on healthy eating and food and obesity. You don't in the UK currently, which I do believe will change. So what a lot of people are trying to validate, and there are hundreds of companies in this space, but it's basically around the idea of a prescription diet. So where now they say don't put a sugar in your cup of tea, what you might actually end up is with the GP printing off a 21-day plan that is literally, you have a budget of £10 a day, and you shop at Asda, Lidl's, Waitrose, Sainsbury's, depending on your demographic, what should you eat and what you can cook. Now that's the element of personalization that I think is going to be interesting, because most of us don't cook for one. But what a lot of technologies are doing, and our big thing around obesity, is 2/3 of everyone's calories are consumed out of home. Now in London, for instance, a huge part of the population eat breakfast, a snack and lunch out of a pret-a-manger or a coco de mama. So the whole argument is that you need to start personalizing those meals to make sure that you reduce your obesity. And also with children, it's that education around maybe not going to Chicken Cottage, but going to somewhere else that might be healthier, that will then save the NHS money. So the future is, to me, a completely connected food landscape where I think we will have carbon footprint, traceability, health, fortified food at crops, down to being able to pop a pill, or as most of us already do, take a shake when you can't have a meal. And it will definitely be a completely connected landscape. In reality, where we are today is 80% of domiciliary care providers and care homes and hospitals not having Wi-Fi. So it's going to be a slow move. And what I've been asked to briefly talk about is that move exactly. So we are currently doing a trial with the CCG. And basically what that was is taking the ability to put food technology that matches people to food around menu plans in care homes in five or more care homes in Salford. The project is 6 months in. It took us 3 months to explain that software needs a hardware. So it was a very antiquated process where the average care home had no hardware. So they would have a computer at head office level, but in the actual care home there were no tablets, no Wi-Fi, no devices. Now that's a very specific demographic. If anyone knows Greater Manchester and the Salford demographic, it is a lower IT literacy than the average UK area. But it was quite a big wake-up call where without Wi-Fi and without hardware, there really is a limit to how much you can innovate. And then 3 months on, it's kind of that very simpleness of easy just putting a food technology in immediately created a change of behavior. So it was the fact that the chefs to the care home managers literally actually have to spend time analysing how much their food is costing them, what the protein content of a meal plan is, what the calories, the salts, the sugars and the fats are, and then rearranging the food around that. So for me, these are kind of what the clinical dietitian has said from his side. For me, it was the aspect that our average care home varied from £2.50 to £7.50 a day in their cost per resident per day, where their budgets were £2.80. So it kind of gives you an idea as to where their costings are going completely out and where they are struggling for money. There's also a huge lack of training within the health and social care sector. So the average chef that we came across believed that you had to take 2 hours to make a soup. So he would boil all the vegetables for 2 hours in a pot on the stove instead of what should technically be 20 minutes if you're making vegetable soup. But what we started to see was just the simple tech of just putting in Wi-Fi and hardware into a care home, how that can change. Now, our obviously thing is to connect that all up and have care homes feeding people at home, have Just Eat feeding people at home, but also have the average healthcare worker know a little bit more about food and nutrition and then hopefully start to educate the population. I hope that kind of gives a mild thing of what food technology is doing and where it's going. I think personally one of the biggest problems we have is between legislation and education. So if you look at Public Health England, there are a lot of legislations coming out as to how to manage nutrition in the elderly and the young. And you look at the Department of Education and they don't believe that you should be taught nutrition in school or when you're studying to be a doctor. So there's definitely a mismatch that will need to be matched up, that I believe will be matched up in the next few months, if not years, where people will start to take food and nutrition a lot more seriously, especially with the like of Pfizer and all the pharma companies starting to look at prescription diets and prescription food. That's pretty much food technology in the care sector in a nutshell. So thank you very much for your time. I hope there was a vague interest to a few of you. And if you want to find out more, please do come find me during the tea break. So, yeah, sure, yeah, fine. Oh, from the doctor, great.
Don't worry, it's not a doctor question. I was hoping you could just answer, if you could get one public health message out there, because we see, a lot of messages about smoking, alcohol, 5 a day, 7 a day, 10 a day, move more, eat better, etc. They're very confusing for the average person.
Absolutely.
Out there. There's just too many messages. What message would you take forward and what would be most effective?
Ooh, that's a tough one. So healthy is defined differently. I think personally, if I could take one message forward, it would be from a public health side is calories don't matter. All the legislation that has come out is all based on calories, and all calories are not created equal. I mean, I would much rather eat 500 calories worth of crisps, but it technically should be 500 calories of vegetables. And I think so much of our emphasis in the landscape at the moment is that you should eat X amount of calories per day. And also, my second thing would be the Move More campaign out of the US is, unfortunately it is true, it's 80% what you eat. You can't eat McDonald's every day and run marathons and think your body's healthy. It's just not the way it works. It is the food you put into it.